talking about? Daryl, eat your dinner, dude. Eat your dinner, man. Don't worry about me. All right, so howdy, people. All right, we'll see if anyone shows up here. Hey, Anthony. How are you, man? Daryl, man, it's not that big of a deal. All I'm doing is just kind of going over some of the stuff that I had. So I guess I'll just start talking. So when I started this whole thing, I basically just dug my grandfather's trains out of my closet and just wanted to do something with it. And it was during COVID, so there wasn't a whole lot available. So I would walk the dog at night and I just started picking up random pieces of plywood that people threw out and, you know, any kind of wood pieces of junk scrap that I thought I could use. And the plan was just to build a simple board and glue some track to it and just roll with that. I had some buildings. I have like 2 or 3 buildings left over from my grandfather, and I was just going to do that and run some of his old trains. Anyway, when I went to go find track and parts and all that stuff, I ended up going to a hobby store that had some FEC stuff, and it kind of went down this whole memory lane thing where I started to remember living by the FEC tracks, and then I really wanted to do FEC stuff, and I was having trouble keeping my grandfather's stuff running because it's so old. I mean, it's stuff from the 60s. I have an old Alco RS2 brass locomotive that's, you know, it's like the worm gears are all chewed up. It's funny because my grandfather always had projects for me when I would go to his house, and he ended up, he always said he was going to leave me everything, but he didn't. He ended up giving it to his railroad buddies, which is fine. I mean, at the end, he had some buddies that used to come over to his house, and they used to go over to each other's houses and run trains and stuff. And it helped him do a lot of the work, and it helped him break down when he finally went into a retirement home. So I'm good with it. But I really do wish he had some brass Amtrak FP40s, PH, that I really wish I had. They were all done up. And some old brass trolleys and really cool stuff. He had gone almost to all trolleys at one point. Hey, Curly, Dwight. One eye open and listening. So I ended up getting all the stuff nobody wanted, which is funny. So I have a few, yeah, well, it was kind of accidental, Daryl. I had other stuff that I could do, but I just kind of wanted to do that. But the problem was trying to go buy stuff. So when I went to go buy like turnouts and track, it was really hard to get it. And the only thing I could get at that point, like they couldn't even order anything. Couldn't even order. I remember I was at one of the hobby stores I go to, and she went on like one of the sites, Walther's or something, I don't remember what it was. And they had one right-hand turnout, and it was like a number 4 or something. That was all they had available. That was it. That was all she could order. And so I was like, okay. And I ended up going to another hobby store, and they had like a bunch of junk in a box that somebody had ripped off of one of their layouts. And that's when I ended up. I just picked up like 6 or 7 of the best ones that I could find. But anyway, what I'll get back to is when I would go to my grandfather's house, he would always have things on the workbench that were for me to fix. because I was the electronics guy. I always built RC cars, and I had, electric motors, and, all that stuff was easy for me. So wiring stuff like that up, fixing it, cleaning it, getting it running again, that's what I used to do. I mean, I had other projects, but I fixed chairs or some, we always had like a list of things that I had to fix. So I would always help him work on his layout, and I learned a lot of good skills. So when he was converting everything to trolleys, he was running overhead. So I think overhead was negative. The tracks were positive. So he had these little brass trolleys, and we hand built the overhead poles and gantries and all that stuff out of brass stock, little plastic beads, ran all the brass and copper wiring. I mean, it was very tedious, but I mean, it was really cool, and I learned how to do brass. So when I got to the RC stuff, I did a lot of scratch build stuff in brass. It's a whole different world, isn't it? And it makes it harder, especially if you're running power through the catenary. Yeah, right. But I have other products. I mean, I have a list. I have RC planes. I have RC cars. I do leather work. I mean, I had plenty of stuff to keep me busy. I just really wanted to do this. So I ended up getting. I have a couple of his old locomotives. Some of it's like German and Swiss stuff, because it was overhead, and I really don't know what I'm going to do with that stuff. But I do have the all Alco RS2, so I will eventually do something with that. I don't know what yet, but I'll. So this project was originally meant to be that, and it was only a 4-foot board, and then I ended up finding more wood. Yeah, that's, you know what, Anthony, that's such a cool spot. I mean, I've taken Amtrak probably from DC to New York, and intermittent spots between that so many times. So I know that track well. That's such a cool place. Especially like in the morning, you're going through. It takes, because those trains never go through the nice part of town. It's always through like just the sleaziest parts of town. So if you're like in the morning and stuff, and you just see people waking up, and all the bums are coming out of some alleyway, to me, it's just such a cool ride to see all that. When going from like DC to Penn Station, or Philly to Penn Station, or something like that. It's so always fun. Or that whole ride. So I love the Northeast Corridor, Amtrak, all that stuff. So passenger trains were always the special place in my heart. I have no experience with freight trains other than living by them. I used to live in New York, so upstate New York, I had Conrail. And then obviously when I was in Florida, in Miami, I could see it would have been for me like living in that white building in the background there. That was how close I was to the FEC line. So I used to see them every day. I had to interact with them every day. It was like I would sit at a crossing and be late for work, and it would just be hopper after hop. Yeah, it is. Especially if you hand build them. If you hand build them out of brass, that's something. I have a picture somewhere there. I'll post it of like a small set. I have a couple pictures left of his second layout. His original layout was still in the basement of the house in Connecticut. I think that room was probably 25, 30 feet by 20 feet. Yeah, that's fun, Anthony. So when I finally got all my wood and stuff together, and I started to make the board, as I started to lay track and try to figure out everything and try to get this to where it was something that was workable, sensible, something that you could, I was going to build a switching layout, obviously. So the original idea, you can kind of see, I'll pan over here a little bit, was supposed to be like an alleyway shot. So you can see that there's a back of a building right there. And that building actually is a wedge, because the track runs at an angle, basically runs from corner to corner. It's 8'9" long by 15.5 inches deep. And I cheated where the white building is and kind of made it back a little further. But from right here to that tan building is about 15.5 inches. I think that sits right on the edge of the board. And then the white building in the background there, I cheated and added a couple more inches of wood just so I could, thank you, get a little, it just wasn't going to make sense having the building that pressed that far up. So when I started to do this, I kind of expanded from 4 foot. It was going to be a simple Y, or just a one line and a spur to feed a business, just so I could switch cars. And I ended up finding some more wood, and I ended up making it 8 foot 9 inches long. And it originally had a runaround right here. So there was a switch here and a switch right here. So it came down here, and then on the other side, it went down. So that made this real usable. So then you could switch out both sides from both lines and do some really cool stuff. Anyway, these 2 turnouts were incredibly cheap, and they were broken when I installed them. And I just tried to solder them and fix them, and it just never worked right. And they were a pain, and everything stalled, and it was just awful. So finally, I got to the point where I ripped them up, and I put straight track, and then I didn't ballast for a while because I didn't know if I could live with it. But I still had the other 2 turnouts down here, right about where that boxcar is. And they were so crappy that 3 weeks ago, after soldering them and trying to fix them, I finally gave up and just ripped it out. And I was like, I don't care anymore. I'm going to live with it. So these two tracks now are independent. And I would have never been able to build this originally this way. I would have thought there's no way I can live with it. I'm not going to be happy. But now I'm okay with it. I'm fine. And at the root of this whole project is this was never meant to be anything more than just track glued to a piece of wood with some buildings on it. As time went on, I started to do more things, and I wanted to learn more things. Like I wanted to learn how to make trees. I wanted to learn how to do this. I wanted to learn how to do that. This became this involved thing. It was never, ever meant to be anything like this. So to me, I look at all this as practice. This was practice. I learned how to make fences. I learned how to make buildings. I learned how to make telephone poles. I learned how to make all these little bits and bobs and scale parts and pieces. And so this was all practice. So whatever happens to this, I can live with it. And, I'm at the point now where I want to do something else, because the skills that I learned from this, I want to apply to something that makes more sense to run every day. I mean, this is fine. I'll try to pan back a little bit. Forgive me. Well, bunghole camper. All right. I do have a lot of practice with styrene and brass. You have to watch the beginning. The beginning is not as important, Jerry. I'm actually getting to the meat of it. So let me see if I can. This is gonna get swingy for a second. So it's kind of a mess right now, but if you can see, like I have a desk in the center, and then it's kind of a mess right now, but it sits on 4 pallets. There's where all the wiring is for the lighting. And I've kind of got a mess, but this is like storage on both sides. And then I have a computer, and there's a little programming track behind it where I have all the stuff hooked up. And then this was the original idea. It was supposed to be like an alley, like when you cross the railroad tracks and you look down and you see all the stuff happening. That was kind of the premise. So there were buildings and trees and obstructions on both sides. That was the original idea. And I also made everything removable. So everything just comes right off the board. Right? That was another piece that I wanted to do. So I'll give you an example. Like, if you look at the truck shop parking lot, the fence in front of it, the wooden fence behind it, are all built on one piece of styrene. I can lift that whole parking lot and building right off the board. The building behind it comes off the board. All the trees are either, right now a lot of them are sitting there because I don't know where they're gonna finally end up. But the other ones have either a dowel, screw, or something, and they're just sitting in a hole drilled into the board. Well, there goes that. So everything's removable, and that was kind of a key thing for me. So Jerry, this was where I was telling you I had the turnout. So I still have 3 turnouts in here. It's basically 3 small spurs. So I have this one that turns down into this little thing, which see if I can get it to zoom in. No. So right here, I can put different things. I could put a parking lot there. I could put another business. I could put a multitude of things here to change this, or just use this as a little storage spot, and then just switch out cars here. And then I'll move this out of the way here. The LPG facility, and this is one of the things, had I had to do over in this, your wife is removed. I can park 1 tank car there, and I'm gonna build the little, whatever the little extraction tower is for it eventually. But if I had to do anything over, I would do this whole thing different. Now, I wanted to build, the reason it's called Oges Park is because I used to live in Oges, Florida, which is part of North Miami. And there were some really cool things there that I wanted to model, but at that point I did not know how to do it. I could do it now, but I didn't know how, because the buildings were just such a weird place and such a weird angle that I don't know how I would have done it. So now I could do it, but I followed the FEC line till I got to something that made sense for me, because I wanted a double main line and I wanted buildings on both sides that I could switch out, businesses on both sides. So I ended up following all the way down to Hialeah till I got to Northwest 30th Avenue, which I'll put you on Northwest 30th Avenue right here. So if you went to Northwest 30th Avenue and you stood on the south side of the tracks and you looked across the railroad tracks, and if anybody has ever watched like Tolga East Coast, he's filmed from this exact location several times. Yes, Amtrak does run. It runs, I believe it runs north and south, because I know I've taken it. It comes out right by the Miami airport, and it runs on the same track as Tri-Rail, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've been on those, but I've taken Tri-Rail and Amtrak down towards the airport. But this, actually, the Metro Rail, which is a commuter passenger service, runs right behind. So if you were to look down here, like this is all very prototypical except smaller. This building in real life is about 1,000 feet long, and here it's about maybe 350 feet long in scale. So if you were to stand on Northwest 30th Avenue, look straight ahead, to the left, you would see a business there. It has an LPG facility that I think is out of business, and then some other smaller businesses, several smaller buildings. I chose to go with one bigger building just because of the backdrop. I wanted this look. I wanted a very Miami looking building. Plus, I only had 3 inches to work with, so I wanted to use the space and angles and stuff to give it more depth. If you look to the right, you will see a warehouse that looks very much like this. There is a tower right here on the top, on the left-hand side, probably for elevator or something like that. But the rest of it looks very similar, and it has, push this out of the way. It has this weird bay like that, and then several more ports. And then if you look down, there is a truck shop. The parking lot is very similar to the prototype here, but just smaller with a lot less stuff. This truck shop is actually a lot longer, so it would extend. And then behind where that truck shop sits now, the building is actually on the other side of the main building there. And then right behind that is the Tri-Rail. So I think that's 27th Avenue, right by Liberty City. So the Tri-Rail, or Metro Rail, actually comes up and then curves behind this street and then goes towards Hialeah. So this actually is encompassed by the Metro Rail. But this is pretty close to the prototype. Also, on the other side of the LPG facility, you'll see in the background there's a gray building. There's 2 buildings that look very similar to that building in on the prototype. And then there's another street there that would probably be 32nd, I think. 32nd Avenue, 31st. I'm not quite sure. And then on the south side here, where it's just wood, is the other spur, and it's a warehouse. I think it's Mr. Green's or something, some kind of, I think it's produce. So this is where the runaround was, in the center of the track, which made it more usable. I mean, it made way more sense as a model railroad, something that you could use. You're going to switch out to have those there. Yeah, CSX. There's actually Norfolk and Southern Yard, not far from where this particular spot is, to the west. And then if you go back and watch, oh, just is gorgeous. Thanks, buddy. If you ever watch Toga East Coast, he's always at what is it called? Not ISIS. It's the Diamond. I can't remember what it's called, but that's where the CSX crosses over the FEC line. I can't remember what it's called, but he always films there. And there's a bunch of other like South Florida railfan video guys that also go there. But yeah, I think Norfolk and Southern owns a yard there. CSX runs a lot of that stuff through there. No, Plant City's, yeah, he does Plant City's north, but Plant City's north of me. What is the name of it? I can't remember. It's not ISIS, obviously, but it's something like that. Iris. I think it's Iris Interlocking. That's what it's called. So you have Tropicana Plant. It was, yeah, where Jerry was talking about. Yep, Plant City. But CSX does that for sure. CSX is all over Florida. I'm just partially FEC, because I always love the Flagler story. I mean, if you think about it, Florida was just a swamp till he decided, oh no, let me build stuff there. People will just come there. I mean, people thought he was, yeah, Lance does, he modeled the downtown spur, which is not far from here. And that's, again, where that would be on the southern side of the Iris Interlocking, where CSX actually crosses. So if you were to stand, again, Northwest 30th Avenue, and you were to go down this line a couple of miles, that's where the Iris Interlocking is. And then if you went south, there's a bunch. You know, it's funny because if I had unlimited resources, unlimited space, and unlimited time, I would just model Hialeah, all of it, because it's fascinating. There's so much railroad stuff there, stuff that's in use, not in use, been there through the ages. But the architecture, the way that the railroad interacts with the city is really cool. I mean, yeah. I'm afraid to build a Tropicana plant in my house because I'm sure it'll stink. I had a girlfriend that lived by one in Port St. Lucie, and it was disgusting, man. That smell it was worse than the paper mill I lived by. I still can't drink Tropicana. I put it anywhere near my face, and I just instantly just want to vomit. The smell just is putrid. I have no idea what kind of oranges they use, but it's awful. Yeah, Lance is good. And the shame is, I mean, obviously he's trying to make money, so he's got books and other things he wants to sell you. So he doesn't post a whole lot of videos. Thankfully, like people like Tolga and some other guys have filmed his stuff. But I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. And the guy has, a great outlook on hobby and model railroading in general. Yeah, his stuff's fantastic. But yeah, what he modeled, and also what do you call it? I can't remember his name. He also has some really good FEC stuff. Pomona. Yeah. Pomona's good, dude. You got some cool stuff. You got some cool stuff around there. There's so many places that you could choose to model, that are just outstanding. I've thought about all kinds of different places that I've been to that were just, and even simple places. It doesn't have to be extensive. I mean, this is, if I had a different floor or track plan, and just a little bit different ideas of what I was going to do. I mean, this is 8 feet 10 inches, and it's built on scrap wood, on pallets that I found in the garbage. I mean, anybody could do this. I mean, it's not that difficult. You know. I mean, the stuff is out there. This was pretty cheap. I mean, for the benchmark and all that stuff is pretty cheap. Obviously, I got some really crappy turnouts. I'm gonna build whatever I do next. I'm gonna build all my own turnouts. So that's one of my next projects. So I'm not gonna do anything until I learn that. I won't do this again. I mean, I don't care how good other turnouts are. I'm not going through this. I'm gonna build my own. I know there's a lot of decent companies making good stuff out there, but it's expensive. I mean, you're gonna put 4 turnouts, you just spend $200. That's crazy. So again, this was like I said, to me it was practice. A lot of this is temporary because a lot of it I didn't know what I was gonna do, and again, I'm kind of stuck in limbo, but here's a good example. Everything comes off the board, right? Bingo. There's all the pine trees. So I do that I did it this way for a couple of different reasons. I wanted to be able to move stuff if I needed to work on it. I like to take pictures of everything. Because it helps me going back and looking. Well, I mean, it would be insane not to look at this thing and not realize that. Yeah, and Jerry, it's nice too because you can work off the bench. You can take everything off and just go work on the bench. You don't have to do it on the layout. Sometimes standing up doing stuff like this is fine, but sometimes it gets a little tedious, and it's nice to be able to just pull it off and go sit on your bench and do the stuff. But I mean, it would be crazy not to look at this and not think that Boomer had a tremendous influence on what I did here, because it did, and there's a few reasons for that. Like, he speaks a language that I understand. I've been using art supplies since I was a kid. I've been, Golden and Liquitex products. I bleed Tamiya. I've been building Tamiya kits since I was 9. I think I got my first Tamiya kit, maybe younger. I've been building RC cars since Tamiya started to put RC in their models. Yeah, and this is what I'm getting to, Anthony, is like one of the things that I took from him. So when I first started watching him paint with Tamiya paints and isopropyl alcohol, it instantly clicked. It all made sense to me. His technique and how he was doing it, and it made complete sense. And I've started to paint everything that way. So everything on the layout is painted. I paint the grass, I paint the trees, I paint everything, and everything's painted with Tamiya. And when you learn how that technique with the airbrush, you can get different effects. So you can not only change the color, but you can change tonality, which you can't do with regular paints and an airbrush or a brush or rattle can. It's just not going to happen. Also, you're doing thinner layers. I could give you an example. I painted this using that technique, right? I don't think I can zoom in on it. But if you look, I didn't lose any detail because the spray is so fine, you don't lose the detail. Also, I am weathering and painting at the same time. So I'm not painting the model and then going back and adding more layers of powder, more layers of color, more layers of this. I'm actually painting that into with minimal layers. I mean, you don't lose any degradation in the detail. Plus, you can paint shadows in. When he said, I heard him say one time that because of the size of the scale, it's hard to create shadows with natural light. So if you paint them in, and I paint shadows in everything. Everything has a shadow. So if I know I'm going to plant a tree or something like that, I paint a shadow on the ground. Ever had it work, dude? Right? Everything is painted this way. And I'll give you a good example. The tanks. The tanks are only painted on the top. Right? See that? There's a natural shadow painted into the model. The bottom is black. Top is white. There's also a shadow painted on the ground here. So the ground is darker under it. So when the light hits it, the light doesn't have... Here's the trick about having a model railroad. I'm 100% sure where my light source is coming from, right? Unlike the natural world, the sun moves, whatever it is. I know where the light's coming from. It's coming from up here. If you have a model railroad and you're not sure where the light's coming from, you might have a problem. So in that sense, when I look at my layout, I look at the colors. I look at how the colors blend together. There's a warmth. There's a softness. There's like a glow to it. I've never seen Boomer's layout, but I can tell you in person, it's got to be full, just mind-blowing, because I can look. Yeah, Anthony, I'm not going to delete it, so it'll be up. I don't think you'll be able to see the comments or something like that, but yeah, I'll leave it up. But that's the thing, is like, if you look at Boomer's stuff and you think it's good, I can tell you probably have no idea how good it really is, because I don't, and I paint the same way, and I will never go back. Daryl, it's so easy. I feel like going to California and just helping you paint that stuff, because it'll transform everything. It's one thing. It doesn't take much to learn how to do it, and once you do it, it revolutionized. I've been painting with airbrush for most of my life, so I'm okay with it. But I never. Yeah. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for stopping by. And I didn't see if you had stuff on there, but I'll see if I can find your stuff. I'd love to see the Northeast Corridor stuff you have. But I'll never go back to painting models the way I used to. Yeah, exactly. And that was the point. I mean, why spend $250 on a fully detailed locomotive and weather all your stuff? I mean, you might as well put it in a setting where it actually matches. I'll never go back to painting any other way. I mean, it would take you probably, a dozen tries. I mean, just to practice. But once you get it, and it's not that hard. There's only really two things you're controlling. Once you figure out how to thin the paint correctly, which is the hardest part, I think. And then it's just air and paint. It's just a mixture of air and paint. You got to think of it it's like a carburetor, but instead of gas and air, it's air and paint. So you're just controlling the carburetor. And once the muscle memory hits, which it doesn't take that long, and you learn the technique, because I'm going to do a video eventually on it, but you can go back and watch how Boomer does it. I think because Boomer's done it for so long, a lot of times he'll glaze over things that people might not pick up on. Like I said, I don't think most people, they comment, they're like, oh my God, your lighting is so good, but they don't realize the lighting is only half of what I've done here. The shadows and highlights are painted into the model. So of course the lighting is going to look good because there's already highlights and shadows painted. The light is just exposing that. They're already there. And I think a lot of people, when they watch his stuff, they miss that part of it. It's one of that's what I get from it. And it's not the lack of his explaining it. It's there's something there, because that's one of the biggest comments I get is about lighting. And I had a couple of people, I think it was Bill from My Finger Lakes Layout. I actually did a little explanation of him how different light affects. Yes, yeah, he was a professional model builder for museums and for public people, and yeah, I that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna do it, but it's just like, so I'm trying to find something that I have where I've actually used the technique. But just using air. So when you blow paint, if you blow air on it, it changes the tonality. You can take it from dark to light just with the airbrush, just with air. So when you're painting a model, and it's just so hard to see on here. But if you look, let me see if I can get something to point with. And it probably won't make sense because I'm not doing it at the moment. But if you just look here, right? Like look in the center here, right? This is done with air. So this is all the same color, just adding more paint and more air actually lightens it. So I can change the tonality of the color. So it was darker than this, but by blowing the air on it, I actually can make it lighter. And he shows this technique. I think when he was doing the little tow truck, he's blowing air on it. He's showing it, but I think most people may not have figured out that he was doing it as a highlight. So like, let's say you want to highlight like the top of this ridge on the fan, right? These were metal etch. I switched these out. So let's say you want to, you just blow air on it when it's wet, and it'll actually turn white or whiter or a lighter color of whatever shade color you just did. Like right here, see this little highlight? That's the same kind of thing. You would just blow air there as you're painting. Just hold the airbrush there with no paint, because you can control the paint flow and airflow at the same time. And you can see it down here a little bit too. So that's what I'm talking about. And I think once you figure those things out with the airbrush, which is not that hard to do, if you know what your end result's supposed to look like, you just got to figure out how to get there. And once you figure it out, it's a done deal. It becomes so easy. I know it sounds nonsensical, but it really is true. I know I have something where I can show where I've done that. I just don't know what. But here's another one. So when I built this little guy here, this is another one. See? There's shadows painted. See the bottom of the roof is black. Randall, how are you, sir? Good to see you. So there's no paint, or there's black paint under the roof. But when it sits there, it just looks like a shadow. Now, if you were to try to do that with just the lighting, it doesn't have it, but it looks like lighting. It looks like lighting is doing this. It's just like the bottom of the vents here are black, right? Or a darker color. But it looks like it's shadow from lighting, but it's actually painted in, right? So the shadows are painted into the building. And I think this is the key that a lot of people miss. Hope that makes sense. But that's something that you can only really do with an airbrush. I mean, I guess you could do it with a brush, but it'll never look right. So I'm also at a quandary because where I live in Florida used to be extremely cheap to live. And I have a decent sized house. Can you tell me where they're doing it? Yeah. I think, yes, Daryl, I think once you weather it, or you've done enough weathering, or you've looked, like I do extensive research. I'll just stare at stuff. I'll take pictures. By the time, here's what usually happens. I have memories of things, right? Things that I've had from the past or something that I saw. And then I do research online, and then my brain fills in the rest of it. So I end up with like this mismatch. So a lot of times it's not necessarily something that's even real, but it's based on something real plus memories plus whatever. So it ends up something. But my theory is it may not, it like this part of this building. This might not be exactly what's there, but it looks like it could be. You know, it doesn't look out of place. And I think if you hit that, then having complete accuracy isn't as important. You know, because it looks like it should be, right? Like this building isn't the exact building that's there, but it looks like it could be. You know, that building doesn't exist. It was copied off of a few different buildings I saw in Hialeah. It has that Florida architecture to it, and that was pretty much all I needed. And I just went from there. But if it looks like it should be. Yeah. So, you know, I think I've probably modeled that way most of my life. And here's the other thing is like a lot of things on here aren't exactly prototypical. A lot of these things aren't, you know, may not be something that was in Miami or Florida or whatever. But I did it because I wanted to learn the skill. And it's the same thing with my leather work. A lot of things I make, there might be like one person that's going to buy it and they're going to look at it and go, oh, I have to have that. And I've sold those things based on that. But I did it because I wanted to learn a specific skill. And had I just kept making the same thing, then I wouldn't have learned those skills. And that's what you see here. Like the little generator house that I just showed you. That's modeled after one that's sitting next, like I park at work and I look at this thing every day and I'm like, I'm just gonna go home and build that. And I did, but it's not on the prototype. It's not necessarily anything that you would see in this area, but I wanted to make it. And I'm never gonna let things like that, you know, stifle my creativity. If I wanna build something, I'm gonna build it. And you know, I learned from that. So that's usually how I work. And most of what you see here is based off of that. I wanted to learn how to do these things. I would like to build another layout, but what I was getting to earlier was, you know, where I live in Florida has gotten so expensive. When I moved here, you know, I first moved here in 2002, then I got married and moved away, and I moved back in 2015. This was really cheap to live here. Rent was cheap, houses were cheap, everything was cheap. But Florida, and especially this area, has gotten so expensive. I mean, yeah, thanks for liking my garbage, dude. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I see. Yeah, Closet Branch, no doubt, man. I'll send you my brain. You're welcome to it. You can pick that shit apart. Yes, damn near. Well, it's not even New Yorkers, it's Midwestern. Jerry, I'll give you an example. I went to the grocery store the other day and I pulled into the parking spot. To the left of me was a Ferrari. To the right of me was a Bentley. And in front of me was a convertible Rolls Royce, all brand new. Now, when I first moved here, there was really not, I mean, Naples had a small niche little area and there was a lot of people that, you know, had money, obviously in Naples, but this has expanded. I live, you know, 20, 25 minutes north of Naples. And, you know, I'm surrounded by everything they're building. They're not building anything other than apartment buildings and places that start at 500 grand plus. My rent went up 50% last year. I make really good money and I don't see how I can afford to live here with the increases that are coming. So I want to start a new project, but I don't know if I can. So I'm going to have to probably move sooner rather than later. Yeah, Boca's nice. I used to work in Meisner Park off and on. So I had the company I worked for had a place there. So I'm familiar with Boca. Yep, Sarasota is nice. My buddy lives in Sarasota. I go there often, and I like I said, I've been in this area off and on since '02. And when I moved here in '02, it was dirt cheap. There was nothing. I mean, I looked at a place when I first moved here to rent, and it was so cheap and so dirt. I was like, I can't even. There's no way. I don't care. I can't live here. It was absolutely hard. They ripped those places down, and now the condos there start in the millions. Not even kidding. There's $1 million just to buy a condo there. It's insane. So, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't think I can live in Florida anymore because insurance has gone up so much here. And I'm not like, sorry, it's not trying to like turn this into a bitch session. It's just reality. I want to do another project and I don't know if I can. It's basically what I'm getting at. And I don't know if I can, where I can move to. I don't know. If anybody out there in train world knows, places where it's still relatively inexpensive to live, let me know. Because I'm probably going to have to move. I don't know if I'm going to be in Florida. I don't want to leave Florida. I love living in Florida. But my insurance is, car insurance is, not California. Come on, Daryl. Can I live? I'll paint your layout. Hey, I'm not a bad roommate. I'll weather all your stuff. Come on. Let me come live with you, Daryl. I'll live in the garage, even with just me and the dog. I got a dog. Dogs can hang out. We hang out in the garage. West Virginia. I don't think so, Jerry. There's a few. I grew up in upstate New York. I won't move anywhere cold. If I have to, then I don't have a choice. But I don't want to do that. I would rather stay. I would love to go back to Miami, but I don't think that's possible. That would be my ultimate dream. I may end up somewhere in like a little bit north of here, more central Florida, which I don't want to do, but I've got to live somewhere, right? But I don't know what I'm going to do. But literally, my rent went up 50% last year. In 1 year, bang, 50%. And I'm like, holy crap. And every other expense went up too. I mean, obviously everybody's feeling it. I know that. Everybody pays for gas, everybody pays for food, everybody pays for trains. So I really want to start another project. Because this was fun. This was fun for me. It was a learning experience. Randall, my boss just moved to, South Carolina. My boss just moved to Arkansas, my old boss, and he's happy, but I've never been there, so I don't know. My ex-wife was from Charleston, South Carolina. I lived there. I actually got stuck. Vero, you know what, Jerry? That area, when I first moved down here, I moved here in '90 and ended up in Port St. Lucie because that's where my girlfriend's family moved to. And they bought a 3-bedroom house there, 2-car garage, like this new community they built with a pool and stuff. It was like 60 grand. It was so cheap back then. It was ridiculous. Ridiculous. Yeah. Missouri does have hobby shops. I order from, was it Midwest? Every once in a while. They're nice. They have good prices. They have good selection. So I've ordered from them a few times there. I think they're in Missouri. I think Missouri, right? Yeah, no, that was my goal. I really wanted to. A little bit of background: when I got married, I moved because, Tennessee scale trains. I moved to Charleston, and the market was hot here. That was '06. January of '06 is when I moved, and I owned a house. I'd owned it, and I was already on the good side, right? So right now I would have my house paid off. It would have been fine. It was brand new house built in '02. And then I moved in '06 and the market crashed and I got stuck with the house because it never sold. The market crashed. Like, I'm still convinced that I caused the bubble. It was like the day I listed, it's like the day the market crashed. But I already was moving. Yeah, well, 2006 to 2008. And so the Fort Myers area, which is where I had my house, was only superseded by Vegas, I think, in the amount of nonsense that really happened. So they built Iron Plant Hobby, Missouri. Yep. Hobbytown. You know what? Hobbytown's kind of. I had friends that worked there when I was in Charleston, and it was okay. I mean, it was okay. They didn't have anything. It was kind of, you know, I I never had a really good experience. It wasn't bad. You know, it wasn't like I walked out mad or anything about Hobbytown, but it was never a really good experience. Like I never found exactly what I wanted. They always had trouble ordering stuff. It was just ridiculous, you know. Like they would tell me, "Oh, we can't get this stuff," and then I'd walk back and it would be on the shelf or some nonsense. And like I said, I knew people who worked there. I mean, it's all right. I'm glad they exist, you know, because in a need, you need, you know, glue or styrene or something like that. They're there. But it wasn't like the old town kind of old feel hobby stores where you walked in and there were just guys hanging out and you know you could talk to them and stuff. And they always had like old junk and cheap stuff. That's the kind of hobby stuff stores I like. So there, I go back. I moved to Charleston. Never sold my house. Ended up almost destitute. I lost everything. I had investments. I had two brand new cars that were paid off, but my outgoing expenses was like $8,000 a month because I was trying to support a house and everything here and there. It was a mess. So I ended up divorced and broke, and it was just such a bad. Everything that could have happened bad to me happened, and it took me a long time to recover from that. Yeah. uh, yeah, Anthony, I've ordered from a few of those, but I never ordered from Lombard. But I know other people have said good things about them. But I love places I've ordered from. I try, you know, here's my theories. Like I have several. One of them just closed down, which I'm kind of sad about because he was a really cool guy. It was just a little hobby store, but he always had Athearn stuff. He always had good deals. He always like took care of me and stuff. And he closed down because everything's here just got so expensive. You can't even own a hobby shop anymore. And it was out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it wasn't anything. People, I guarantee the building's sitting empty, but they've raised his rent like to some astronomical amount. Um, I will always try to go and buy whatever I need at my local hobby store because when I need something, they're there. You know, I've got a few that, yeah, I remember you saying that, Daryl. I've got a few that are, I got one that's like 15 minutes drive. I've got the one in Naples. The family is owned. Like you go in there and the guy's like 70 years old. There's a picture of him as a kid behind the counter. I mean, they've owned that place since forever. And they're great people. They always take good care of me. They know who I am. I walk in there. If I ask the girl for something and they don't have it, the next time I go in there, she's ordered it for me. She's like, Christian, I bought this. I got this in for you if you want it. You know what I mean? That's the kind of people they are. They know I'm going to buy it, so they just order it. They don't ask me for this. Can you put the, you know, stuff like that. Right, exactly. And that's why I will always try to support my local hobby store. Now, I have like a like that 15-20% rule. So if I'm looking at a high dollar thing and it's only 20-30 bucks difference between like a locomotive that I can go down the street and buy or online, I'm going to go buy it from there. I'll spend the extra couple bucks because I know they're going to be there. You know, I don't care if they make money off of me. That's what they're there for. Now, if it's 150 bucks, you know, if it's a big difference like that, I'm going to order it online. You know, that's how I view it. I'm not going to do it because I want to support them. So I'll always try to support the local hobby shops for that kind of stuff. And I'll buy big dollar items there as long as it's not, if it's not going to save like, you know, less than 20%, I'm going to buy it from them. And I bought a lot of locomotives, my DCC system, a lot of the things that I bought, all my lighting stuff, I bought from them. You have mentioned you're married, Daryl, and you're usually in trouble. She must be a wonderful woman. Let's give her some credit. She's a modular harp somehow, because it's funny because my ex-wife, she never cared that I did this because she was like, well, at least you're not at the bar or the strip club, so have at it. It's your time. It's your money. You're home. I'm happy. That's how that was her. I was like, okay. Well, you eat well. That's she's Cuban. You eat well, dude. I don't know any Cuban women that can't cook well, and I lived in Miami. Yeah, exactly. And you know what? The train shows are cool. I haven't been to one locally. You know, the most of them are on the East Coast. Nope, she only cooks spaghetti. Is it black beans and spaghetti? I don't think I could live in Jacksonville, Anthony. My cousin used to live there. She hated it, and I went to visit there a couple times. I don't know. It's not really Florida. Jacksonville is Georgia. Let's be honest. Yeah, I don't know where I'm gonna end up. I got to figure it out soon though, because summer's coming awfully quick, and I feel like if things keep going the way they do, they're gonna raise the rent again. And I don't even blame my landlords, because they're stuck in a bubble too. They've got their insurance is going up. Homeowners insurance here is stupid. So they can't eat the cost. South Beach. I used to work on South Beach. It's funny because Jerry, do you remember watching like Scarface and Miami Vice and seeing the South Beach episodes there, or when like you see Scarface, he goes out and shoots that guy right on Ocean Drive, gets in a Cadillac and does a U-turn. Oh, it was an Impala, I think, convertible Impala. When I first moved to Miami, it was still, I mean, so those movies were, mid to late 80s. I think Miami Vice was mid, late 80s, right? So I moved there in 90. And it was still like that. It was still run down. It was just starting to come back. And in the 90s, all the money moved in. Hollywood, New York, fashion, TV, movies, all that crap. And it completely changed the landscape. And now you go there and it's a whole different world. A whole different world. It's I don't have any desire to go there anymore because it's not the same. I give you an example. The last time I took, yeah, Daryl, that's insane. That's what I'm saying. That's crazy. That's my entire income for rent. There's no way. When I first moved into the place where I moved, I was paying $9.50. I pay $14.50 now. And it's not that I can't afford it. I don't want to afford it. I don't want to have to work extra hard just to live. I don't live, it's not like, yeah, I have three bed, two bath. It's a duplex. I have a yard because I have a dog. I have a garage. And it's not that I can't afford it. I don't want to afford it. I don't want to have to keep working my ass off just to pay rent. I don't live. It would be different if this was paradise. Like woo, I live in the. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was cheap here. It was. But everywhere was cheap when I moved back here. That's why I came here, because it was cheaper than Charleston, and I never really enjoyed living in Charleston. I never felt like I belonged there. Florida has a very unique thing where nobody's from here, so everybody kind of just belongs. Especially like Miami and stuff. I never felt out of place in Miami ever, anywhere I went, because there's nobody from there. Give you some, change the scenery a little bit. Wilmington, North Carolina. Jerry, I have some friends that moved to North Carolina. My cousin that was in Jacksonville lives right outside of what is it? Richmond. And it's nice, but it's very wintry. I can't get back. Oh man. I was born in northern Brazil. My mother's Brazilian, my dad's American, and I was actually born. I was conceived here, but I was born in Brazil. I grew up on a beach. Winter Music Festival, South Beach. Yeah, man. Thanks, Five with Earl. So I went from tropical beach to upstate New York, which was basically like an ice planet. It's not PA cold, that's right. So, um, I was what, like 3 hours from Canada, 4 hours from Canada. I mean, it was just like living in Canada, and winters were horrible. I mean, I hated being cold all the time, and I think obviously if you look at what I do, I'm a very visual person. When the sky turns gray and all the trees turn black, I get really depressed, because it's like for months on end, you don't see color. It's just everything is just gray and black and wet, cold. And that takes its toll on me. Moving to Florida, you have a bright blue sky, you have lush green, you have white sand, and it's like invigorating. It recharges me. I can just sit outside. Rochester, New York. Yeah, man. Lake effect snow. Get some of that. I went to Rochester once and it snowed the entire time I was there. The entire time. It never stopped. It was like it snowed and then it snowed. They're like, oh, it's lake effect snow. I'm like, this is awful. Where in New York? So that was where I was getting with Jerry. So the last time we were talking about the Northeast Corridor. Last time I took Amtrak, I went from, I think it was right outside of Philly. My aunt lives just outside of Philly, so I took Amtrak, I think it was Acela, from there into Brooklyn, yeah. Dude, Brooklyn is not the same. Brooklyn is actually beautiful now. I went and visited a friend in Brooklyn not too long ago, and it was incredible, the changes there. It's wonderful there. They had all sorts of outdoor stuff. Everybody was outdoors. It's amazing. So I took the train in, ended up at Penn Station, walked out on Madison Avenue, and was just blown away because it was like the food court in the mall. And I remember Madison Avenue looking a lot different. Remember that area in New York, Times Square? It was a whole different world. Yeah, and that was I think the train goes right by. Doesn't it go by Princeton? Doesn't that Amtrak goes by one of those schools? I remember it was really early in the morning. But yeah, I always loved walking out of Penn Station, and you got the garden right there. I'm a Ranger fan, so I love just seeing the garden. Always gives me a good feeling. But man, that was a shock. That was a real shock. I can't imagine. That's been a while, so I can't imagine what it looks like now. And I think Penn Station changed, didn't they? Didn't they make it? Didn't they cover part of that building? I remember seeing something a while back about that. Was that it? It was Princeton Junction? Are you messing with me, man? Classic French, I don't know if I should take you seriously or not. Yeah, yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, Hudson Yard, that's right. Yeah, that area is cool. I always liked that part of New York. I always had friends that lived in Hell's Kitchen that I would go see. Um, San Gennaro Festival, all that stuff. That was always fun. Yeah, I knew it was something like that. I kind of saw it and I kind of glossed over it, and I don't remember what happened after that. But I remember like there was like some plan. I remember seeing something on social media post somewhere a while back. I mean, I guess it's good. Obviously things are always going to change. Can't keep same way forever. I know some of those buildings in that part of town have really cool architecture. I'm sure they probably figured out how to save. I can't imagine that they were just going to demolish a lot of that stuff unless it was just too far gone. Well, guys, I think I've talked enough. No, I won't say that. And here's why, Jerry. I I think the most time consuming thing for me has been the decision making, right? So deciding on what to do, what not to do, took probably the most amount of time. And then deciding on how to fix the structural issues that I had took even more time, right? So I've just got to this point where now I realize that I can live with these tracks being divided without a runaround, without any kind of crossover, without anything, right? So I've got a north track and a south track. South track has one spur, north track has two. I've decided I can live with this. So I've still got to build the upper valance that will hold the lights, because right now I just have these lamps. And I have a few other lights that I'll move in and out depending, like when I shoot a video or something like that. So right now that's it. The background is just 4 sheets of architectural foam board that I painted blue. They're just temporary, but they work for now. That will all get filled in. And then once I'm done with that, I've got to do a few little bits in here and there to buildings. Still want to do a few more street poles and lights. And then I will be done. But at that point, I think I'll probably be done living. I'll have to do something. So I don't know what we'll end up with this place. Like I said, everything gets removed, can come right off the board. So I can pack everything up, move it off. I mean, the board itself lifts right off the pallets. I mean, it's held on, but it'll come right off. So I could take the board and put it on. I could build an actual table at some point and put it on there. I don't know what'll happen to it, but again, I'm not married to it. I don't have like some incredible feeling towards like, oh, this thing has to live forever. It was practice for me. This was all just to figure out how to do these things. Do I enjoy doing this? Fly, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think right before you got in here, I was talking about I may have to move soon just due to the skyrocketing costs in Florida. I will. City edge layout. Okay. But I can move this thing without any issues. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But I don't know. Like, I want to do something different. I have so many ideas in my head of things that I want to do, and depending on because honestly, if I stayed here, my plan was this is 8 foot 10 inches. I can run to that wall, which is 20 feet. Right? So I've got another 12 feet there I can work with. And then there's another wall here, and I can actually run through that whole thing. I could. I mean, I'll lose my living room, but what do I care? Can always try a reef aquarium. Yeah, buddy. Fishing trains. So, again, it's all up in the air. I don't know what'll happen. And like I said, I'm not really married to this. So if Otis Park goes away and I end up with something else, yeah, I'll miss it. But like I said, I'm not really married to it. It's not an emotional attachment for me. I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish, for me. Um, I think I got out of it way more than because when I started out, it was just supposed to be a piece of wood with track glued to it that I could run my grandfather's trains. And, I ended up spending way more time and effort on it than I had ever planned to. So again, whatever happens to it, it is what it is. I'll do something. I would actually, I have some unfinished RC projects. I have a Jeep. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, the board is not that big. It's like a longboard, California guy. It's literally like the size of a longboard. It's like a wooden longboard. I could carry it in my hands. I've moved it several times because the times where I've had to do work on it, I can lift it right off, just remove all the trees and buildings, just lift it right off and just carry it right out the door. So it's not that big of a deal. But I don't know how much more. This is the best analogy that I've come up with. Let's say you love boats and boating. Yeah, exactly. But let's say you love boats and boating, and you have extra wood, and you have space in your yard, backyard, whatever it was, and you want to build a schooner. You love this schooner. You've seen this thing. You'd be like, I want to build this thing. So you just decide to slap this schooner together. And then once you get to that point, you're like, you know what? I could add this, and I could add sails, and I can actually, I'll get my friend to sew me some sailcloth, and I'll do this, and I've got these brass pieces. And you end up just over detailing the thing to the max, just because you can and you have the time. And then at the end, you're like, you can't take it and put it in the water. It's not going to sink. I mean, it's not going to float. It's going to sink. It's not a viable vessel. It's not a seaworthy vessel. You didn't build it for that purpose. And that's kind of where I ended up here. I have something that's visually appealing, but it's not the most functional. And it's not to say that, I can't run the trains. And I obviously, since I moved the two crappy turnouts, I don't have really issues. The other two turnouts are still sketchy. The one works fine. I've never had any issues with it. The other two, every once in a while, I'll have a little bit of glitch and I'll have train stall on it. But I can live with those things. I come here in the morning. I've got my computer right under the desk here. I can sit here, drink a cup of coffee, sometimes I just stare at it. I got the door open, the sun comes in, the sun hits it. I see all the shadows from the trees. I can fire up one of the locomotives, switch a few cars around. I'm happy that this does what I need it to do. If I do another project, I want to really dive into something more scale, more prototypical, something that's actually in the real world that I can, I want to be able to look at it and say, yep, this is an exact replica of something out there. That's kind of where I'm at. It's either going to be something like that or something based on it, something that's more functional, something that makes more sense. This is what it is. It doesn't make. Yeah. Yes, I've seen his channel. One of the lessons that I learned, and I kind of had in mind when I started this, was my grandfather, his second layout. So he had a big basement. He cut it into 3 rooms. One had boilers and all this stuff. The other one was storage. They were both kind of storage, like a shop. Then he had one where he made an office. And in the back office was a shelf layout, right? So it was probably at this point 15, 20, 25 feet. I don't remember how long. By 2 feet deep. And then he had 2 loops in the rooms. So the train would exit through the wall on the right and left-hand side, go around the loop and come back in. What that did was it left sight and sound, much like a train in the real world. When you've got that much, that's about, if you were standing in a big, huge open field and you were looking at a train, that's about how much you're going to see. You only see a train for about 1,000 feet. Jerry, Randall, you guys, you rail fan all the time. I mean, how far away is the train when you're standing there with a camera and it actually comes into view? It's 500 to 1,000 feet max. I mean, you hear it before you see it. So when you're building a shelf layout, I mean, that's about what you've got. So this really is, I mean, if you're looking down there, this is 300 feet. I mean, that's about where a locomotive is going to come into view. When your train first is going to come in a couple hundred feet behind that. So this is kind of like a realistic setting for rail fanning. I mean, this is about what you'd see, maybe a little bit further away, but not much more. You're not going to see any detail. You're not going to see what kind of a cab it is, or who is it is. You know what I mean? It's not. You're going to see a train, but you're not going to see exactly what it is. So it's not going to come into detail. So I want to do something like that. And if you watched my last video, that was kind of the premise. There was, your train has an origin, has a destination, and it travels some distance to get to those things. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a train. If it was right next door, you just push the boxes or crap or whatever people right next door. So it's got to travel some distance, but it starts somewhere and it ends somewhere else. I mean, that's basically the premise of railroads, right? I mean, it's moving freight or passengers from that one place to the other. So I want to be able to do that, and some of the things that I have in my head, I can do that with a small shelf layout and encompass that whole theme in a very small space. I wasn't able to do that here, because I really didn't think that way. I mean, I understood that theory, but I didn't know how to put it into practice. So basically my layout is, you've arrived. I mean, it's basically, that's it. I mean, there is no to and a from, it's just here. And so that was the element that I missed. So I've had to kind of create that into the model. So that was the premise of the video that I made the other day. Was, I'm starting at one end. I made 3 very different looking scenes, right? 1, 2, and 3. And that's it. That's your origin, where you're traveling through, where you end up. I mean, that's the basic premise. But I think with a little bit more space, and I want to say I can do this, we're about 20 feet, 20 linear feet should be sufficient. A little bit more would be better. Right now, because I haven't put the top on it, it's about 45 inches from the ground, I think. Somewhere right around there. It's just shy of 50 inches. So it's about chest high. And like I said, I'm sitting down, and I'm on a office chair that's cranked up all the way, and the board is at eye level for me. And then if I bend over a little bit, I've got a computer. I'll pan down a little bit. So there's a computer here, and I've got like a little desk, so I can sit here and do work and plan out stuff. And then I've got a programming track behind it hooked up to the Loke sound system, and that runs into the computer. And then that's it. This is just up here. So it's really a piece of furniture. When I'm done with it, that's why I put it in my living room. It's just a cool thing to have in your house, right? I mean, it's just, you've got a little workstation, some storage space, the desk with a computer, and above it is a little shelf layout. And eventually I have the LED bulbs that go for 8 feet of them, whatever it is. So once I build the valance and all that stuff, it'll be shadow boxed. And that'll probably happen here within the next couple of weeks, because I finally did the track, and now I realize I can live with the 2 separate tracks. So then it'll be done. What happens after that? Yeah, 58 inches, that's a little bit higher, Daryl. Daryl, how tall are you? I'm 6 foot, so that's what I'm saying. It's when I stand up, it's a little bit low for me. But I will raise, I want it to be, I say right around 50, 55 inches, I think. Once it's finished and I really have to work on it, then that's probably going to be the optimum height. Yeah, so we're the same height. Yeah, because I know when I see you working on, or when the times where you've showed your layout, it's right about your chest high from what I remember, which is good. I mean, that's about where you want it. I kept it this way because until I had finished everything, I could sit, like I said, I'm on my office chair, and it's at eye level. It's almost at the height where you're looking at it now. So everything's at eye level. The trees actually grow up. The buildings are actually higher than my eyesight. So it's a very realistic feel for me. 52 inches. Yeah, you're not that much higher than this one is now. No, you know what, Anthony? There's a lot of people making great backdrops. Yeah, me too, Jerry. I'm about to call it quits. I did this because I was like, sometimes you're trying to type stuff out and explain stuff. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'll just go on and explain it. But Anthony, I just want a simple background because most of the time you see the sky in Florida, it's just either white or blue. Every once in a while it's cloudy. I like the way I painted. I did like this streaking effect, and when I change the lights, I can get different things. And I've tried it with like tinted yellow and red lights. So I wanted to do like some sunset stuff, and it works really well. So I think I'm going to keep that. And I think the other part of to me, it doesn't make sense to buy a blue background. You know what I mean? Because those aren't cheap. Anytime you print vinyl printed stuff, it's not cheap. I want to do like right here where I was talking about Northwest 30th, right here in the back. If you see back there, I'm actually going to build a photorealistic street scene out of styrene and paint it. And it should be fine. But I don't see the point of buying a photo background if it doesn't have detail, if it doesn't have trees, if it doesn't have mountains, if it doesn't have buildings. I don't want to pay for just blue paper or vinyl. You know what I mean? So it doesn't make sense for me. I want to build everything. That's part of the fun for me. I'm a model builder. I get enjoyment out of making things. I don't want to buy anything. That's kind of why the only things that I bought on here, I bought the tanks because that was literally one of the first things I bought when I started this thing. And I really struggled with HO scale. We're all gonna dream about you, buddy. I'd always built in 1/10 scale. So if I saw, like, I give you an example. I walked in and my girlfriend had hair ties on the bathroom sink, and I just picked one up and I was like, oh, that's a freaking 1/10 scale bungee cord. I just wrapped wire, made a hook on each end, slapped them on top of my Jeep, and perfect bungee cords, right? I could see a 1/10 scale very well. I see things that, I understand the size very well. I could see it. When I started 187th, I had no idea the relationships of size. So trying to make those tanks would have been a task. I have the ability to do it in styrene or brass or whatever. I struggled with the size. How big do you make these things? Now I don't struggle. I see everything in this size now. So that was one of my learning curves. The two biggest things that I struggled, I think, with HO and building this layout was a lot of the structural things, like laying track. I had never done that with my grandfather that I remember. I may have done some very small part, but I ended up with a lot of weird gaps, and I didn't know like where you tie the two things together and you pull out ties. I kind of jammed them back in there, so I ended up with like raised areas where it's like really bumpy. I made a lot of little mistakes like that because I didn't know. But those weren't my real struggles. One of my real struggles was seeing things in scale and trying to replicate them and not having them look odd. And trees. As an artist, I painted and drew trees my whole life, but doing them in 3D, the dimension part of it was really difficult. I didn't understand the bone structure. What makes a tree? And I kind of struggled with that until I went back to some basic art and photography principles. And I think I went through that in one of my videos, using triangles and 3 points and stuff like that. And that's how I got through it. And I'm actually working on I'm doing some more videos. I'm going to do 3 different kinds of trees, and that's basically my focus. And there's plenty of ones of how to bend wire and flock things, but how to understand the structure, what makes a tree a tree. That was really difficult for me, and it shouldn't have been. But I had no idea. My dad and my grandfather both did bonsai, so I mean I was around miniature trees. I mean I shouldn't have struggled with it as much as I did, but I really did. I'll post a picture, probably when I do one of those videos, of the first tree I made, and it's hilarious. And I was so proud of it when I made it. It makes Charlie Brown's Christmas tree look like a treasure, dude. Trust me, it was so bad. But I had such a feeling of accomplishment of just bending the wire and making something. And by 3 or 4 trees in, I already had figured it out. I mean, the grove of trees here really was one of my first projects. I mean, they're not absolutely the greatest thing. Yeah, bonsai there. They're not the best looking trees, but for the end of the board, something I just wanted as a view block, it's not that bad. And the tree here, this little guy right there in the corner, that was the second tree I made. So by number 2, I've already started to figure it out. So in Florida, there's a lot of these scrub pines, and most of them are pretty pine shaped, but it's like 1 out of 50, 1 out of 100 looks like it was done by a bonsai master. I mean, there's some absolute masterpiece trees growing in just random areas, the woods, side of the road, gorgeous trees. Just the trunks, the canopy, everything just looked absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. Yeah, no, I worked really hard at it, Daryl. That was one of the things I didn't want to fail. I did not want to fail. I wanted to master trees. And it's taken me a long time. And even after I got the trunks and the structure of the tree, I really struggled with the flocking, because the tendency is to overflock and make things look ridiculous. And it wasn't really until this tree right here where I really started to kind of figure out, again, restraint is the key. But this guy right here doesn't look that bad. Actually, both of those. And the one on the left is knock leaves, and the one on the right is woodland scenics. 2 different kinds of flocking. Both look pretty good. So, thanks, guys. Thanks for staying with me. I know I lost a few guys. It's got to be late. Daryl, you're still here. Randall, you're still here? Closet Branch? Love you guys, man. You guys make this hobby fun. Anthony, I've not used Scenic Express, but I hear good things about them. Daryl, I'm literally, as soon as I get a chance, I'm sending you trees, just so you know. I wasn't going to tell you, but since you're here and I'm tired, and because what I have is I built way more trees than I needed for the board, and then I continued to make it because that was one of the things that I enjoyed doing so much. So like in my spare time, I'll just bend wire now. It's just become a habit. So I keep making trees. So I've got a bunch of trees that I'm not going to use on the board, and I got a lot of trees from my first run, so I'm just going to pack them in a box, and they're on their way. Yeah. Well, I promised you trees, and I sent you a wallet. That's me. But yeah, I don't know when it'll be, but it'll be some point in the near future, so that I can get to a post office and do all that crap. Closet Branch, where's home? Where do you live? Daryl, do you use the wallet? I mean, I don't care. I always like the feedback because I want to see Like when I first started making this stuff, I gave a bunch of stuff out, and some people like didn't like, they put it away like it was, oh, you made it, I'm not going to use it. You're in PA? Yeah. Um, uh, I need to make some bottles and cans too, Closet Branch. So if I can figure this out, yes, you'll be on top of the list for whatever I make. But yeah, if you look around and see all the garbage on mine, that's the one thing is missing is beer bottles and bottles of liquor and Thunderbird or whatever. Missouri. I drove through Missouri a million years ago with my dad. We were going to Midwest somewhere. Well, guys, again, thanks, man. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for listening to me. Daryl, thanks for loving my garbage. I'm going to wrap this one up. I'll see you guys on the timeline. Yeah, exactly, the shitter. More crappy videos. Keep making the crappy videos, will you, Closet Branch? That stuff made me laugh. Thanks for having a sense of humor. I don't inject enough humor in. I love humor. Comedy is my thing, but I don't do a whole lot of comedy and modeling. So it's actually a brilliant gimmick. Yeah, I've got a lot of garbage, and I'm not even done with the garbage. I'm still trying to figure out how to make different things that you find in garbage. And that was kind of the challenge too, because I didn't want to do anything generic. You know, it's like everybody puts pallets and tires, which, I mean, the world is littered with that crap. Thanks, buddy. But I didn't want to do the generic. I mean, they're here. You just have to look for them. There's pallets and tires in the garbage, but you've got to look for them. I didn't make it blatant, but I tried to do other things. That's why I made the couch. I made, different stuff. No doubt, Randall. You need to go home, buddy. That's enough time on the road. I know you got to make money and all, but family's important. Home is important. Sleeping in your own bed I've been there, dude. There's nothing like finally making it home, laying down on your own bed, putting your head on your own pillow. Because there's nothing like sleeping in a hotel or somewhere else, because everything sounds different. Everything smells, it feels different. We hear weird noises. It's never the same. Home is home. You got to go home. All right, guys. It's time for lights out. Shutting it all down. Later, y'all. Thanks, man. Yeah, I know. I've seen so many of your streams lately where you've been in a hotel room. I feel you, Randall. Later, Daryl. Love you, brother. I just got to figure out how to shut this damn thing off.